Warning: the following video contains explicit language which may be offensive to some viewers or inappropriate for children. The content within this video is intended for mature audiences only.
Hello and welcome to this video. We once again return to the world of Hunter S. Thompson, and we continue with his exploits and his craziness. So without further ado, let's get into this.
Or another. George Plimpton. Did any other Beat Generation authors influence your writing?
Interesting question.
Hunter S. Thompson. Jack Kerouac influenced me quite a bit as a writer, in the Arab sense that the enemy of my enemy was my friend.
Yeah, that doesn't always pan out real well, though. So.
Kerouac taught me that you could get away with writing about drugs and get published. It was possible, and in a symbolic way, I expected Kerouac to turn up in Haight-Ashbury for the cause.
But, as history tells us, Kerouac had a change of heart.
Ginsberg was there, so it was kind of natural to expect that Kerouac would show up too. But no, that's when Kerouac went back to his mother and voted for Barry Goldwater in 1964.
And that is kind of crazy if you think about what was going on at that time, and the whole thing with On the Road, which by the way is a good read. You should probably read it.
That's when my break with him happened. I wasn't trying to write like him, but I could see that I could get published like him and break through the Eastern establishment ice. That's the same way I felt about Hemingway when I first learned about him and his writing.
Hemingway was an interesting author. Hemingway's worth a video all to himself.
I thought, Jesus, some people could do this. Of course, Lawrence Ferlinghetti influenced me. Both his wonderful poetry and the earnestness of his City Lights bookstore in North Beach.
I've read some of the poetry after reading the very first time I ever read this book. Found some of his poetry online and read it. It's pretty good. Don't know anything about the bookstore, though.
George Plimpton. What's the appeal of the outlaw writer, such as yourself? Hunter S. Thompson. I just usually go with my own taste. If I like something and it happens to be against the law, well, then I might have a problem. But an outlaw can be defined as somebody who lives outside the law, beyond the law, not necessarily against it.
And that's a good point. A lot of people in this day and age misconstrue it. The word in and of itself tells you its definition: outlaw, outside the law, not necessarily breaking the law or rebelling against it. They just don't pay much mind.
It's pretty ancient. It goes back to Scandinavian history. People were declared outlaws and were cast out of the community and sent to foreign lands. Exile. They operated outside the law in communities all over Greenland and Iceland,
And that's kind of a good way to look at it.
wherever they drifted. Outside the law in the countries they came from. I don't think they were trying to be outlaws. I was never trying necessarily to be an outlaw.
It's especially when we live in a day and age where they make laws not necessarily to protect people, but to keep the prisons full of the people they don't particularly care for. Texas Governor Ann Richards was real bad about wanting to lock up people because of their skin color is too dark, or they just happen to want to give an orgasm to somebody of the same gender. But, that's how come we have the situation we are in now.
It was just the place in which I found myself. By the time I started Hell's Angels, I was riding with them, and it was clear that it was no longer possible for me to go back and live within the law.
It is. I mean, it is. There are certain things that happen in your life. I know there's certain things that have happened with it that I've experienced in my life that make certain things that are considered polite in society or respectable in society really, really hard for me to abide by.
Between Vietnam and weed, a whole generation was criminalized in that time. You realized...
Yeah. And if it wasn't for Jimmy Carter, there'd be a whole lot of Americans still living in Canada because of the whole draft dodging thing. But Carter came along and pardoned them all.
That you were subject to being busted. A lot of people grew up with that attitude. There were a lot more outlaws than me.
And there's a lot more outlaws in society. It just, some people are good at mimicking the social norms, not necessarily agreeing with them or being a part of them. They just kind of mimic them.
I was just a writer. I wasn't trying to be an outlaw writer. I never heard of that term. Somebody else made it up.
And that's interesting that, somebody will apply a tag to somebody like that and it sticks, then that person winds up getting credit for creating the tag that they just somehow, they were the definition and somebody just made a word to go with the definition is all.
But we were all outside the law. Kerouac, Miller, Burroughs, Ginsberg, Kesey. I didn't have a gauge as to who was the worst outlaw. I just recognized allies.
And that, and that is kind of interesting. That's kind of how we do life. I can say, honestly, that I have very, very few friends. I have a few more allies than I do friends, and an ass ton of acquaintances than everyone else. I almost never hate or dislike anybody, despite what some people may think. People that I associated with before seem to think. It's not that I dislike them, it's just I don't like them. They're just there. They're exchanges of oxygen and carbon monoxide. Yeah. Carbon dioxide, excuse me. And that's that's how I regard them. There's no hate. So it is, it's kind of how you got to look at things, and you got to be honest with yourself about it. You have to be honest with yourself about who you would trust to kill you if you needed killed. If you had done something so egregiously wrong or so egregiously bad that you needed somebody to take you out, you have to look at your social group and see, who would I trust if I did X, Y, and Z to make sure that I was put down. And that's kind of how I gauge my friends.
My people. Fall 2000. In the violent years of the 60s, I found myself sinking deeper and deeper into a dangerously criminal lifestyle, along with most of my friends and associates.
And then here's something that just you have to look at just how weird life is. When I worked at TDC, especially in my really young days, in my 20s, it was not uncommon for me in the crowd that I hung out with to fight our way out of bars. Fight our way, and fights would start over some stupid ass shit. But as you mature, you learn. But at the same time, where we're going out on our nights off and getting in fights, fighting our way out of bars, doing things, smoking a little pot here and there, we still, we were the guardians of the convicted criminals. We watched over them. And it's this contrast of hypocrisy that in life makes life really interesting.
I was a hard-working professional journalist at the time, with a wife and a son and extremely smart friends and a brand new BSA motorcycle that was widely admired as the fastest bike ever tested by Hot Rod magazine.
Now, I do not have the inner ear balance to safely ride a motorcycle, but they've always kind of intrigued me.
My comfortable pad on a hill above Golden Gate Park was alive day and night with the babble of artists, musicians, writers, lawyers, wild bikers, and rock and roll stars whose names would soon be famous.
That's interesting because for years, good friends of mine, on Wednesday nights would have it basically an open house. And on any given Wednesday night, you could run into local celebrities, college professors, college kids, philosophers, and there was plenty of things that YouTube would probably ban me or not allow this video to go forward if we talked about in any length going on. So yeah, it was very, very orgiastic, we'll put it that way, and we'll leave it at there.
San Francisco was the capital of the world in those years, and we were the new aristocracy. It was like living in the kingdom of magic. But something about it disturbed me. Something was far out of whack. It was impossible not to notice that more and more of my friends were being arrested and locked up in jail.
And yeah, I went through that in my mid-30s, that yeah, some of my younger friends were doing it. We're going to jail for a lot of things that we did in our 20s and just happened to get away with, just pure luck.
We were doing the same things we'd always been doing, but we were suddenly committing more crimes, felony crimes in fact, which carried drastic criminal penalties.
Which goes back to my observation of passing laws not to protect people, but to fill the prisons, to get the undesirables off the streets.
Like 5 years in state prison for smoking a joint on a bench in a public park, or 10 years for resisting arrest by refusing to be drafted into the army and sent off to die in Vietnam. It was the beginning of the criminalization of a whole generation.
And that criminalization still today. Though today the criminalization is more based on race and sexual orientation and sexual identification than it is anything else. There's very little justice in our laws.
And I soon became keenly aware of it. Even Joan Baez went to jail.
Yeah, that's got to be crazy. If you've listened to anything by Joan Baez and read anything about that woman, the fact that she went to jail is just kind of crazy. We are going to go ahead and call this video good here. Just because I don't want to try to do this around a kitty cat. So, and as always, be a good human. Be good to other humans. Peace.
off.